Live. I'm Kev Baker. I am the co-host right here on tonight's Anthony Patch Show on Truth Frequency Radio Network. I want to thank you all for tuning in to tonight's live broadcast with me and the man himself, Anthony Patch. I hope you're all enjoying that new intro music that Tony has selected there. A very coast-to-coast feel about it, but we go so much deeper than coast to coast. It will make your minds hurt, but in a very good way. And tonight, Anthony has been doing some very, very deep research indeed into stuff like quantum biocomputers, no less. So without any further ado, let's go live to the States, to the home of the man himself, Mr. Anthony Patch. How you doing, sir?
Hey, very good. Thanks for opening the show. Got a little quiet there for a moment. I apologize to our audience. Sometimes I can't always hear the music at this end, but yeah, we're off and running. We're doing great. Feel sorry for the folks on the in the northeast of the United States, Boston and thereabouts. Feet of snow overnight. Yeah, nothing to worry about. Just march on. That's cool.
Yeah, these bomb cyclones. I mean,
Kev, what do you want to talk about tonight?
I'm going to reconnect, Mr. Patch. I think we've had a little bit of a delay there, but, you know, I've been looking from the outside in as all of this kind of bomb cyclone and this weather's been hitting the east coast of the US. And my, oh my, Anthony, it is horrendous, isn't it? Mr. Patch, are you there?
Yeah, I am here. We're just getting some echoes going on. All right. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine, sir.
All right. Good enough. Yeah. Interesting that they call it a weather bomb or what are they calling it, Kev? It's a bomb something.
A bomb cyclone.
Anything to sell advertising. Hype it up, give it a name, and now call it a bomb cyclone. It's a big snowstorm, folks. That's all it is. Anyway, so you just keep jumping in here if I lose the signal, okay?
I will do. You know, it must be that bad weather you're having over there. That's what we'll put it down to tonight, Anthony. But like I was saying to the audience, you've been doing some really deep research today into stuff that we're going to talk about tonight, including human biocomputers or quantum biocomputers.
Yeah, quantum biocomputers. That'll be in the second half of the show today. We're going to do a little review on blockchain. We're going to talk cryptography today and how it relates to the number of qubits, therefore the model numbers of the D-Wave computers. Now, let me just say, we have spent show after show after show talking about D-Wave. And it may seem like it's redundant given the title, given the subject matter of D-Wave, but I really want to emphasize to our very intelligent audience, we know our demographics, you're critical thinkers, you use good discernment, and you want to know the nuts and bolts about what's going on. You want to know what are the systems that are behind what's going on in technology. And I want to address that in, again, some deep nuts and bolts today. Insofar as getting back to blockchain, cryptocurrencies, and Kev, in a little while, maybe after the first break, if you'll play that little snippet of Julian Assange talking about blockchain, because he's reinforcing what you and I have been describing beyond the currencies, beyond the currency transactions that are taking place. What are the applications and therefore implications of this blockchain architecture to everybody, even Joe Bag of Donuts? So today's going to be technical. We're going to talk again about blockchain as it relates to D-Wave. Then we're going to get into, as Kev said, the biological quantum computing that again goes to D-Wave. And the reason I focus so much on D-Wave is not because I have anything against the people that are working there. They're human beings. They're people just like you and me. But it's their belief system, the source of their inspiration, the source of their information, their processes by which they obtain their science of the crafts, which is the Greek translation of technology, science of the crafts. Why is this alchemic, particle physics, quantum mechanics related system so important to me as a researcher? And the guys that speak for D-Wave, like Eric Ladizinski and Geordie Rose, co-founders. Again, I'm not picking on these guys because I have anything against them personally. I'm simply looking at the activities they're involved in and relating it to you as it impacts your personal life, and it definitely does. Now, the touch point, the evidence of it touching your personal life is this blockchain architecture that is beyond just the cryptocurrencies. So it's important that we go into the mechanisms even deeper, and probably Monday and Wednesday we'll continue talking about D-Wave and its relationship to blockchain as well as cryptography, the security of transactions. Because I'm going to show you today in the second half, in the second hour, I'm going to show you the direct connection to the encryption system, the key, what they call in cryptography, the public key, which you use to encrypt and then to decrypt a message, how that's related to the development of the D-Wave computers, specifically to the number of qubits that are used in building one model upon the other of D-Wave computers, because it's going to show you the actual mathematical relationship between the computer and blockchain, because they're lockstep in their timeline of development from their source to today. And I'm going to introduce a new name to you so that you can look this up for yourself between now and the second hour of the show. And his last name is Rose. Now that's a hint, because we may find next week and present next week some family connections here. Gregory Rose. That's not Geordie. This is Gregory G. Rose. And look up Qualcomm. Look up Qualcomm Corporation. I have in front of me a paper that you can look up. It is called Design and Primitive Specification for Boole. Now that's Boolean algebra that we're going to get into. That is spelled B-O-O-L-E. That is the name of the gentleman for which Boolean algebra and therefore geometry arrived and derived from that algebra is named. So again, the title of the paper, you can Google this and find it, by Gregory G. Rose, Design and Primitive Specification for Boole. This has everything to do with what is known as SHA-1, SHA-2, SHA-3. This is secure hash algorithms. Like I said, we're going to get deep into this, but we have an audience that has this type of background. And I want to demonstrate to this audience that understands exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to SHA, often called SHA, as a key for encrypting communications. And that relates to blockchain, the security of blockchain. But I'm going to show you how D-Wave relates directly to that. Now, I'm not saying Gregory G. Rose is the father of Geordie Rose, but it could be, and that's where we're going with our sort of research into family lineage, because this could very well be the paper of the father of Geordie Rose. I can't say for sure. I'll let you guys do some research. I'd like to send you off onto those research rabbit holes along with myself and Kathleen Urquhart, because we're doing a little background. We're doing a little family background on Geordie Rose. Not to pick on him, not to say anything negative about he and his family. We just want to know what they've been researching. and how far back, and how that establishes the foundation for not only the quantum computers, but for blockchain. So the more we know about the players and the papers that they have published going back to 2001, even further back, but 2001, because this is the time frame in which D-Wave started to come together as a company. They started their first foray into building qubit chipsets, their prototypes. And it's all based on base 2 mathematics. So that's where we're going to go. I gave a long introduction because I want people to be able to go and look at that while we're talking about a few other things, specifically about blockchain in this first hour. And as we go into this, we will fold in this discussion of biological quantum computing, because I'm going to reference a paper by Geordie Rose, not Gregory Rose, but by Geordie Rose, in which he's talking about modeling the folds, the structure of proteins in DNA, nucleic acids, RNA and DNA, the proteins that make up our DNA, the folding of which, and if you look at 3D renderings of the various types of proteins in our DNA, I call it curly pasta, because that's what it looks like. But they are using these complex folds of protein folding it's called, as a structure, as a architecture, as a lattice work, and I'll refer to that word lattice work as we get into this, as a model by which they can arrange their qubits and connections of qubits to counterfeit DNA for the process of building a biological quantum computer. I'm not kidding you, folks. I'm reading his own paper. Go to Geordie Rose's LinkedIn. Go to his LinkedIn. You'll see the list of his papers that he's published, and you'll see the one that I'm referring to here regarding protein folding. I don't have to make it up. All I have to do is read it, take the arcane language and translate it so that you're able to digest this, digest the proteins, if you will, and see the relevancy to what all this gobbledygook means to our everyday life. Because our everyday life is being transformed by blockchains as I speak, and we are doing it to ourselves. There's nothing benevolent about blockchains. Kev, I'm going to let you jump in here and give some context to my rantings and ravings.
We've got one of the best audiences out there, we really do. And you know, we've got Mark in the chat. Qualcomm, this isn't a new company to him. He's heard of them before. We've got Chat Rat George in there as well, talking about all the stuff we're on about here. So, Tony, I mean, it just goes to show, and if people want to join the chat room, it's tfrlive.com/chat. We're definitely attracting the right crowd for this kind of information. And when it comes to blockchain, I've been saying now for some time since we've kind of dug into it that 2018 is going to be the year of the blockchain. And I don't mean it's going to be the year of cryptocurrencies, but we're going to see blockchain invading into every corner of our lives. I really, really believe that, Anthony.
I agree with you. That's a good context to set this up with, because you're exactly right. I have called it the mark of the beast system. I don't just toss those words around, just to be sensational. That comes from looking at the actual structure of what they're building. And let me go to 90,000 feet before we get into the real deep nuts and bolts. When we, all right, I was just looking at a message. Sorry.
Well, I've got the actual small clip here from Julian Assange, if you want me to play that while you get your ducks in a row there, Anthony. And this kind of backs up everything we've been saying. And it comes from, like I say, Julian Assange. So I'll just play this quick clip for the audience. Take a listen to this.
And can be used for lots and lots of other things. And so that's the big expansion we're about to see. in Bitcoin all derives from this basic premise that you can prove that a particular statement, a particular consensus, a particular contract happened at a particular time globally. And it requires the subversion of every single jurisdiction where people are running Bitcoin to overturn that.
Am I right in understanding that you're saying that the Bitcoin architecture has applications far beyond the economic role that Bitcoin can play, and that architecture is very strengthening to the life of information in the digital space, making it less vulnerable to the kind of mischief you talked about in Russia or elsewhere? Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. That underlying architecture can be used for publishers, for example, so that, as an example, we are starting to use Bitcoin WikiLeaks, stuffing our cryptographic keys of stuff that we publish. So we prove that we have published stuff at a particular time by stuffing it in Bitcoin, in the blockchain. And then if someone were to come and try and modify the material that we've published to take out particular parts, that would be detectable.
Do you think that?
So that was Julian Assange there, Anthony, basically backing up everything that we've been saying. It's quite interesting to hear how even WikiLeaks have been using blockchain technology, quite a novel use of it here, to make sure nobody comes in and changes any of the whistleblowers' material or any of the data they've already published. Quite interesting, that.
Yeah, they began that before this explosion, this parabolic explosion, as I'm calling it, of Bitcoin and the other proliferating forking of the blockchain system for additional types of currencies, coins. They're not really currencies, they're coins that are developed. And he was very smart to do that because he embedded his evidence into a system that was a public ledger system that was already secure. And he took advantage of that. It's remarkable. He took advantage of that system to protect himself. So he did a 180 on what I consider to be a nefarious system, a non-benevolent system for all of us, and used it for his own devices, for his own protection. So it could not be hacked. It could not be corrupted. As he said, if they tried to hack it, tried to corrupt it, it would be detected. And so therefore, the chain of custody of the evidence, as we say in law enforcement, remains intact, because you can notice if any of that chain of custody has been tampered with. He used the word jurisdiction. Now, Kev, you and I have talked about blockchain violating national sovereignties, violating in the sense of eliminating national sovereignties, because this blockchain system is unregulated. There is no single government, nor any governments at this point, that are able to regulate the system. Therefore, there's no national sovereignty. There's no, as Julian said, no jurisdiction. So in law enforcement, in law itself, you always have to look at the jurisdiction and the laws that pertain and are derived from a jurisdictional area. If there are no jurisdictions, there are no laws, there are no regulations. So he said the same thing, and that was following our statements, Kev. He definitely confirmed this sense of no national sovereignties. The reason I focus on that is because this is a worldwide system that is the integral architecture of the sentient world simulation. We're at 90,000 feet looking at this. We're looking at the sentient world simulation that has every single person represented as a node. Now, in the process of setting up a cryptology system, a cryptographic system, you speak in terms of nodes, the connecting of nodes, the protection of nodes. Now, I'm going to go into something that is nuts and bolts, but I want you to understand that with the sentient world simulation and the architecture within it of the blockchain system, What it is doing right now, folks, is gathering data from all over the world through the Internet of Things. It is gathering it and arranging it and securing it, just as Julian Assange did with his evidence. It is gathering data and securing that data into blocks that are protected by this system of SHA, or secure hash algorithms. The term blocks comes from SHA, secure hash algorithms. And there are numbers of those SHA, those SHAs, 1, 2, and 3. And we're going to show you the direct correlation between the numbers of the SHAs to the numbers of qubits in the D-Wave computers. But specifically from the SHA-3 or any of the other iterations of the secure hash algorithms, they refer to the information, the data being arranged. Specifically for this example, SHA-3, they arranged the data known as W bits, those are word bits, into 16-word blocks, or chunks, if you will. They call them chunks here. But the block in the blockchain at the SHA-3 level, and we're going to go beyond that, but at the SHA-3 level, the 16-word chunks of data are blocks. What they're doing is they are filling blocks in the blockchain with secure data, not just cryptocurrencies. I want to emphasize that. As Julian Assange said, they were putting their own evidence into these blocks to secure it. This is also what he was saying in that little clip, a very telling clip. He packed a lot into a few words. He was talking about how all of the other areas of our lives, this is why it's relevant, all the other areas of our lives being brought into this blockchain architecture. In other words, all of the data that is being gathered through this architecture of the sentient world simulation, through the sensors, if you will, through the inputs of the Internet of Things, is increasing the number of blocks, therefore the density of the data that is connected as nodes that cannot be broken unless you have the key, the SHA key, the algorithm, the encryption key, to then decrypt the information from a secure environment. What they're doing is they're folding everything that makes up our lives into the blockchain system. And that statement Kev and I have made for weeks now was just backed up by Julian Assange himself in that little clip you just heard. We don't make it up. This is not woo. This is not Freaky Friday, folks, as much as I love those guys and what they talk about, including Kev. This is hard science. This is hard mathematics. These are the facts we're reporting. This is not blowing things out of proportion. What I'm saying to you emphatically is we know what we're talking about. We've got the evidence in front of us, and we're warning you about the evidence of evil. Go ahead, Kev.
And you know, all of this data that's been packaged up and put into blocks right now, I mean, this for me is the road to the universal basic income. Because we're staring a future in the face right now, Anthony, and all you listeners out there, where the robots we talk of as well, they are set to impact the workplace big time. It's going to revolutionize the workplace to the point where we will have no jobs. Now, at that point, we've heard of this universal basic income a lot. There's been a lot of talk about how we'll get money when we're not working. And I imagine, Anthony, when that does get rolled out, that too, along with all of our other data, is going to come to us via the blockchain. And if we're not on it, we won't get it.
Yeah, let me see what our timer says here. We got 11 minutes. So let me give you some hope.
Well, we've got about 2 minutes, Anthony.
Oh, well, my computer is way lagging. Yep, we got about 1 minute. Well, why don't you take us out? I'll shut up for a minute. You go ahead and take us out.
Now, folks, this is really, really important stuff. And, if there's one thing only you take away from the whole talk on blockchains and stuff that myself and Anthony do, I just hope you have an appreciation for the fact that it's not just related to cryptocurrencies. Usually, you've got Bitcoin and blockchain, the two words go hand in hand, right? But that blockchain is so much more than just a cryptocurrency. It can be used for literally anything. We're seeing law enforcement now starting to use blockchain technology, with Julian Assange talking about it there as well. Every aspect of our life will soon be saved as a block on the chain. Stay tuned. We will be right back.
You're listening to the Truth Frequency Radio Network.
No hate, no hype, no fear.
All right, welcome back. This is Anthony Patch, the Anthony Patch Show with not Geordie Rose, but the one and only Kev Baker with his golden parachute on, standing at the door, ready to jump in case I nosedive us right into one of those topological qubits with a tall mountain peak when we don't hit entropy at the base and solve the problem. So if you know what D-Wave right along, and that music, I want to say, is a tip of the hat to, well, coast to coast, I guess we could say, but to Art Bell and my mother, who passed away about 5 years ago at the age of 94, loved the coast to coast. So it's my little tip of the hat to my mom, as Kev would say about his mother, who's a big fan of Mum. When Art Bell was handling the reins of coast to coast, she really enjoyed that. And I guess through the DNA, it's rubbed off on me and what I'm doing here. But as I said a couple of weeks ago about my mother, she received, just before her death, a medal from the United States government for her work on the Manhattan Project at UC Berkeley, where she met my father. And she worked directly, I mean, literally directly with Dr. Lawrence, Dr. Oppenheimer in the development of the bomb. So it's no wonder I'm as crazy about all things quantum computing and particle physics and DNA research. And we're going to talk about DNA today because it is all tied into quantum computing and CERN in terms of protein folding, synchrotron particle accelerators, and biological quantum computing. So there's a lot going on in there. There's a lot rattling around in my DNA, if you might want to say, rattling around in this crazy head of mine.
Oh, definitely not a crazy head, Mr. Patch. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly reconnect you, okay? Because you're starting to sound like Sophia's cousin periodically. So I will reconnect you imminently. Stand by, sir. So, folks, we're going to get Anthony back. Anthony back with us just in a moment. And how interesting. He talks about his mum there who did work on the Manhattan Project. And, I honestly do think that Tony has definitely moved into the arena and the topics that he was almost destined to cover. I think that's why we're also blessed to get a front row seat into the research that he and Kathleen and sometimes even myself get up to, because this research here into the world of quantum computing, DNA, all that stuff, it might not seem like it now to you out there, but I can assure you it is going to have a direct impact, if it hasn't had so already, on all of our lives. So hopefully now we can go back live to the man himself, Mr. Patch. Are you back?
I'm here to next switch systems, but we'll try to plug on with what we've got. Anyway, back to the topic du jour today, and that is getting back into blockchain and this encryption system. And it's fascinating when you really dig into this as deeply as Kevin, Kathleen, and myself do. The three of us, as our tetrahedral arrangement, our trinity here, we really, really do dig deep into these. And it's interesting. Before you know it, the hours have just gone by. The rabbit holes we get into, it's like you get caught up into this. It's almost like an endorphin release. I know that seems really geeky for me to be saying these things, but when you get into research and you start discovering these nuggets of information and you start seeing the connections, it can really become addictive. And therefore, as talking to Kathleen about this morning, we can understand why people that are involved in the deep science of the topics we're talking about, how they can get totally caught up in it, the fascination of it, the addictiveness of it, the pursuit of knowledge does produce a high for those of you that want to be critical thinkers and want to use your discernment and do the 180 process that we talk about to discover the truth. And let me take that 180 for a moment and go back to something that we've quoted many times with Geordie Rose back in 2013, where he said, in describing standing next to one of the D-Wave computers, it was like standing next to the altar to an alien god. Now, the reason I bring it up again is if you just simply 180 that statement and you say alien and 180 that, well, it's not euphemistic for him to say alien. He is actually telling you, and those that do know the origins of the D-Wave systems, being in geomancy, the alchemic origins, if you will, that when he says alien, he's talking about communicating with the other side. And those that are caught up in that system know exactly what he's saying when he uses the word alien. He's not talking about people from, Draco or some far off star system that's coming back and there's going to be this disclosure that we've talked about. It has nothing to do with off-planet aliens coming in here from another solar system, another star system. It has to do with communicating into another realm with those entities that they derive this information from. And we've laid the case here on the show, Kev and myself, our guests that we've brought in, the month after month publications of Entangled magazine that has laid the foundation for everything that I'm talking about today. If you want the details, subscribe to Entangled magazine at anthonypatch.com. And what I'm talking about today will be in extreme, exquisite detail in the February 1st issue. So this is just the tip of the iceberg, folks. But when he talks about an altar, it is literally an altar. It is, have you ever heard of the software company Oracle?
Oh, yes.
Do you know what an oracle is? Okay. So what we're talking about here is the cloud temple. An oracle would go to an altar. An altar typically is in a temple or it can be beside the temple. And an oracle is, someone who's communing with spirits and giving arrived just out of marketing hype. It is a spiritual message that is said, that says we are using the zeros and ones to communicate with the other side. The information we're getting from the other side results in our software programs that we build at Oracle and on into D-Wave and others, including IBM. Everything in the binary world is derived out of the practice of geomancy. Okay? So when he talks about an altar to an alien god, he's talking literally. We've built an altar. We are communicating with an alien god using this device. It is not just him being off the cuff when he speaks to an audience of venture capitalists and scientists back in 2013. He uses those words specifically because he communicates to those that are in the know, as well as trying to say to people in the audience, this is how we get our information. If you want to know, dig into my words. That's what Kev and I have done, is dig into the origins of his words. Why he talks about an altar to an alien god. Take it literally, folks. That's my point. So, the cloud system. This is the cloud AI system. This is the hive mentality system. All of this push to store your personal data, your articles, your letters, your emails, all of your files in the cloud instead of in your hard drive, is to add to the granularity of the data in the sentient world simulation, and all of your data is embedded. It is encoded into blocks. Now, one of the folks in the chat room, I won't use her name, but said, I still don't understand blockchain. And I totally get that, and I want to address that very quickly. Essentially, you have groups of data that are encrypted, and then they are connected to each other, and it is called a public ledger system. In other words, the data is secured, and the record cannot be tampered with because it's encrypted. And technically speaking, can always be looked back retrospectively to look at the ledger and the transactions that are the contracts that are connected to those points of data. So every time in the example of currency, every time a currency is created and every time a currency is bought and sold or traded, there's a record of it. Now, take that example of just the coins and apply it to legal contracts. Apply it to information gathered through traffic cameras. If you live where Kev does in the smart city of Glasgow, everything that's going on in that city is being pumped into the blockchain system. Okay? So it's a record-keeping system. But here's the insidious part of it. Unless you have a key, a public key, an SHA-123, and we're going to go through the numbers as I promised in just a second here, unless you have the SHA key, the secure hash algorithm, and hash is there. Remember hashtags in tweets? Okay, the hashtag is part of the encryption system. So all those tweets are feeding into a secure blockchain environment. They're adding to the granularity of the data of the blockchain. Why am I going on and on about granularity? It is because it is building out the system that will result in not a necessarily and just an augmented reality. Think of Pokemon Go, where there are images, data images, that are superimposed upon your view of reality through your smartphone. It's not just augmented, but it is a revising of the reality, which was the title of my third book, is revising the reality into a new virtual reality, one that you do not need virtual reality goggles for. The granularity is the density of the data. As you increase the density of the data, the granularity as it's called in programming, you reach a point where you have a virtual reality that you can participate in, that you can be a part of, that you can be immersed in without any technical device, without any virtual reality goggles. This is where I describe this spontaneous conversion of data into matter. Now, this has already occurred with, quote, holographic projections of data that result in objects you can physically interact with. You can touch, you can feel, you can move them about. This was already done last year in Japan. We're talking about the spontaneous conversion of data into physical matter that results in a new virtual reality. The sentient world simulation, picture that as a ball, a sphere, because that's how it's arranged, that is taking in data. And the more closely packed, the more blocks in the blockchain that there are, the closer you get to a reality that is actual matter that you can physically interact with. That's the virtual reality they're building. When I talk about blockchain being the mark of the beast system, what I'm saying is a virtual reality, a reality 2.0, a terraformed reality built of data in the architecture of blockchain that is now your entire reality. This is why Joe Bag of Donuts needs to pay attention. This is where it is going, and it's going there very, very quickly. The more that the parabolic rise in cryptocurrency activities continues, the denser the data, the increase in granularity. Everyone participating, whether it's in cryptocurrencies or the other aspects of the blockchain system that Julian Assange was talking about, the more that that is participated in, the closer we are to a new reality 2.0. It is no longer just a revising of reality, but it is a physical manifestation of a new reality on this planet. Here's the good news, folks. One, that's called the Mark of the Beast system. If you take the Mark of the Beast, you are now part of this reality 2.0. You are now immersed in the blockchain architecture. You are now secured in a system that is unbreakable because it is driven by quantum computing. The good news to that, don't take the Mark of the Beast. The even better news, by not taking the Mark of the Beast, thus denying you access to that reality 2.0, is you get to live in reality 1.0 that God created, because Satan is creating the 2.0. We've laid the foundation for this all being satanic. It's not hyperbole. We've shown you the origins of binary computing in geomancy, a dark art, an alchemic art. We've laid the foundation. Go read Entangled magazine. Okay? The good news is, by denying the Mark of the Beast, by not taking it, you remain in God's reality. Now, in Scripture, it says, unless you take the Mark of the Beast, you will not be able to buy or sell. Who cares about buying and selling? Stop for a moment and think about that in the bigger picture. Go to 90,000 feet and look at it, folks. Do you trust God to provide for you? He provided for Jesus in the wilderness. He provided during the Exodus manna, bread from heaven. Okay? He will take care of you. The scriptures say that he even takes care of the sparrows. He will take care of those that turn to him and are saved and have the Holy Spirit. He will take care of us in his reality 1.0. So for me, the joy is, hey, you want to offer me the Mark of the Beast? Take a hike. I don't want to be in your virtual reality 2.0. I don't want to be in Satan's reality. You know why? Because then I'm part of the hive mind. I'm plugged into the cloud, the AI cloud. I'm controlled by Satan and his minions in 2.0. I don't want to be in 2.0, and I will survive and, in fact, thrive just fine outside of the 2.0 reality of Satan. How can I say that? Because even Jesus Christ said that we would do greater works than he. Look, the book of Daniel I've referred to as being unsealed and saying that it is not a book. It is a damming up of the flow of information until the latter days, that God held that information until the latter days. The information that Kathleen Urquhart has presented in our webinars is astounding related to the book of Daniel and the flow of information. What we are showing you is that flow of information that was withheld until the latter days. What we are showing you through Kev Baker, Kathleen Urquhart, Anthony Patch is the information that was sealed up. Things like understanding something as basic as everything binary comes out of geomancy. showing you the origins of quantum computing and how they are actually in their mechanisms communicating with the other side. We've shown you the evidence factually from their own published papers. And after this break in the second hour, I'm going to dig deep into the D-Wave that I was setting you up for. Okay? So the good news is we are being transformed right now by the information flow that was sealed up until these days. God is providing to his people that turn their face to him, that are saved by him, that are found in the book of life. If you seek it, he will give it to you. He will give you that information. Likewise, he will give you that which you need to live, not just survive. I'm not talking about living in caves. I'm talking about being well taken care of, food, clothing, shelter, well taken care of. Outside of that reality, that the rest of humanity, and I'm sorry, folks, it's 99% of humanity, will take the mark of the beast and they will be in reality 2.0, and therefore they will have the hive mentality. They will have no independent thought. They will have no sense that they've even been transformed, and they thus will be controlled. This is not hyperbole. You read the book of Revelation, it says exactly what I'm telling you right now, as does the book of Daniel. I don't have to make it up. I can read it and report it, whether I'm looking at the Bible scriptures or I'm looking at the published papers from those that are building reality 2.0. You don't have the benefit of the time and opportunity to do the research. I understand that. My purpose for being here is to be that reporter, taking the research and giving it to you. I try very hard, so does Kathleen and so does Kev, to keep our own hyperbole out of it, to keep our own, extraneous conclusions out of it, and stick to the facts, to be very, very careful about what we present to you, because it's all verifiable. And I gave you the source of the paper we're going to go over after this break, the design and primitive specification for Boole, spelled Boole, by Gregory Rose, who possibly could be the father of Geordie Rose. I haven't verified that. But this comes out as a paper from Qualcomm when he was at Qualcomm presenting SHA-3 at the time to the National Institutes of Science and Technology, NSIT. So it's an older paper, but it gives you a touch point. It gives you a paper trail as to where I'm going with the more advanced numbers of SHA. And I'm going to give it to you because we got 4 minutes here, a little hint of where we're going. In this paper, if you've had a chance to dig it up during the last hour, is SHA 256. 256 is exactly the same number of qubits in the second model of D-Wave's computers. The first was the 128 qubits, the 128 qubits chipset. That was sold to Lockheed/USC for their quantum computing center. It was sold to Google. It was sold to the NSA. And since then, several others. Interestingly, the 256, which corresponds to SHA 256, along with many other iterations of SHA encryption keys that relate directly to blockchain, the 256 model was never sold, as far as I can tell. It's not a publicly sold model. Why did they hold back the 256? Because the 256 was where they finally let loose the AI-driven blockchain system, the origins of blockchain, the starting point of blockchain, where it went live was with the 256, second model of D-Wave quantum computer. This information has never been released to the public that I'm telling you right now. This takes deep research to come up with this. Now, this paper that I'm citing from by Gregory Rose, I give credit to my better half. No, Kev, it's not you. To Kathleen Urquhart for finding this paper for me. And when she gave it to me and I started reading through it, it's just like a lot of things that she sends my way, and we go back and forth with it, and it's astounding. And I'm only taking excerpts from this paper. But it's astounding when you see the connections to what is going on today with blockchain and artificial intelligence as well, because they're inseparable.
It makes you wonder where the whole blockchain came from, Anthony. It really, really does.
Well, given the fact that it is unbreakable, it came from quantum computing, specifically D-Wave. We got about a minute. Take us out.
There you go. And, Anthony there was talking about the hive mind. And I'm pretty sure that to a man and woman listening to this show, none of us want to end up in that reality. None of our thoughts are own. And the best thing I can compare it to with what I've been watching lately is old episodes of Star Trek and the Borg. And I almost choked on my coffee the other night because in one of the episodes, Mr. Patch, they were trying to de-assimilate a human from the Borg collective, bring it back into its individual state and humanity the way it should be. And one of the key pieces of technology that they had to work around was a microtubulin interface. Yes, that's right, the very microtubulins that I would never have known about unless I'd been working with Mr. Patch. So there you have it, folks, the Borg mentality, that kind of hive existence that we see depicted in Star Trek. Is that for you? That might be the real far end of it, but that's exactly what they're planning for humanity down here. Collective humanity. And we'll be back right after the break. We've got so much more to get into with Mr. Patch. Don't go anywhere, folks. We're just getting warmed up. TFRlive.com. Share it on all your social media wiretaps, and we will be right back.
You must unite what is inside us all.
We are TFR.
Truth Frequency Radio.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Kev Baker. I'm your co-host for the next hour. We've got 1 hour remaining right here on tonight's Anthony Patch Show. And of course, Anthony Patch is here with me as well. Well, sort of. Now, as you can probably tell, we've been experiencing some technical issues here behind the scene tonight with Anthony's connection. And unfortunately, we've lost him during the break. Now, fingers crossed we will get Anthony back. I'm sure he's switching on to another hotspot or another means of communication right now as we speak. But yes, like I was sharing there before the break, and I never hide the fact that I watch a lot of TV shows, and it's almost amazing the amount of information that now makes sense to me in those shows that possibly would have gone right over the top of my head beforehand. And the best example of that recently has been Star Trek again. And I'm just about to be joined by Mr. Patch. Here we go. We'll add him into the call. And yes, like I was saying, these microtubulins that we've been talking about so often when it was to do with the Mandela effect and mind control and how they could basically change our thoughts in our mind. I mean, imagine my surprise when I hear that very same language being used for technology belonging to the Borg, a hive mind collective of robots stroke anything else they assimilate along their way. And if you want to take that kind of Borg analogy or metaphor even further, it would appear that we're the next to be assimilated, because the hive mind is something that's been constructed right now in this sentient world simulation. It's everywhere. And we spoke about H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu the other night. And of course, Cthulhu is a winged reptilian with the head of an octopus. And on that octopus, well, there's tentacles. And I honestly envisage this Internet of Things that is all around us right now, Anthony, but has been like Cthulhu, because its tentacles are absolutely everywhere, absorbing and soaking up our data and our energy everywhere we go. And all of it, of course, been put into blocks to construct that hive mind that they want to bring us into. And I'm glad to have you back with me, Mr. Patch. I thought I was going to have to fly solo for the second night in a row. Not good.
Oh, that was terrible listening to you last night. I felt your pain, my friend.
It was painful. It was really painful. You know, I knew in the back of my mind, Bill Bean, as much as I love the man, he's so busy. And from time to time when I've booked him on, you know, things come up. And I don't hold that against Bill in any way. However, from a personal, selfish point of view, woof. Flying solo for 2 hours? I don't like listening to myself for 2 hours, Tony. You're good at this kind of thing. Some people, some can't, but 2 hours is a long time with Kev Baker.
No, you handled it. It's just tough when it's not planned and you don't have your notes in front of you and things like that.
Oh, listen!
I felt your pain.
Listen to that. You sound like a fine malt whiskey now, smooth and delightful, Tony.
Well, I did have a malt whiskey just between the breaks there. So, you know, yeah, I'm a heavy drinker. Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Sure. Well, thank you for digging me out of the muck there. I got to tell you, sometimes Skype can be very, very frustrating. But anyway, we switched systems. Here we are. Let's run off with it and get as much into the show as we can, Kev. There's an interesting thing in blockchain, and this is real kind of deep stuff. But in the blockchain transactions, when you are creating a block, there's a thing called a nonce. That is N-A-N-S, nonce. And it's actually, that's the pronunciation, but it is spelled N-O-N-C-E. What that basically means is that they're setting up a random number, what they call a nonsense number, when you are putting together a string of numbers and words to create a block, to create a transaction. And in order to track that transaction, you're creating a nonsense number, just a random number, after those lines of, let's call it code. And you have 17 zeros that precede a string of then letters and numbers. And the letters actually correspond to numbers as well. But in order to create this nonsense number that is preceded by 17 zeros, you actually have to have a specific type of encryption hardware, not just the software, but you have to have a specific type of hardware, computer system, a CPU, that will generate enough iterations of this random number until it precedes by a zero and then another zero and another zero, and you keep repeating until you have this nonsense number that you've created preceded by 17 zeros. Again, I told you I'd get into the weeds here and the nuts and bolts, but I'm telling you this because this is laid out in what I would consider to be a 5-year-old document of SHA-3 that was being offered to National Institutes of Science and Technology for standardization at that time of an advancement of an encryption key from SHA-2 to SHA-3. This was a proposal paper. So this is the kind of investigative trail of evidence, the chain of custody of evidence that I present to you as the audience to show you the origins of blockchain, so that those that are out there that are programmers and scientists know that I know what I'm talking about. Without being a mathematician myself, I understand the overview from 90,000 feet of the system enough to begin to see the origins. I don't have to know the mathematics to understand the system, and enough to be able to present it to the audience so that they can say, there is definitive evidence that what I'm talking about in terms of the blockchain being the system that will take over everything in our lives. I'm demonstrating to you that I do the due diligence to vet my statements before I make them. And this also occurs, of course, with Kathleen, who's brilliant in her ability to research, and then turns this kind of evidence over to me, and then I take it and tear it apart and make some sense of it. And then I shoot it to Kev Baker and I blow his mind. But that's okay, because then he gives me, again, that context. He is able to say, well, from my body of experience with the guests that I've interviewed and the research that I've done, speaking for Kev here, this is how I reflect or react to what you just sent to me. And he'll do the same thing Kathleen does, and he'll send things to me, and I just, like, oh, perfect, let's dig into that one. So that's how we do this, but let's get back into it. As a hash function, talking about Boolean algebra, Boolean math, that is the core of this SHA, this secure hash algorithm. As a hash function, bool is intended to be, quote, and this is in quotes, to be like a random oracle, close quote. Why do they use oracle? It's not the name of the software company. Why do they call it like a random oracle? In a scientific, mathematics-heavy, peer-reviewed document that is designed as a proposal for a new encryption key, SHA-3 in this case. Why do they use the word oracle? Why does Geordie Rose talk about an altar to an alien god? Okay. And then it further in the same sentence, it says, in the spirit of SHA-3. Again, why the word spirit in a scientific document? I'll let you answer those questions yourself. When operated with a key, bool offers message encryption or message integrity protection. Our supplied source code uses 2 instantiations of bool data structures to achieve both at once. Our code requires use of a per message nonce. Again, spelled N-O-N-C-E, but pronounced nonce. Use of a per message nonce. In other words, every single message has to have this random nonsense number preceded by 17 zeros. When used as a stream cipher, the only requirement imposed on the nonce is uniqueness. So every single blockchain has a nonce assigned to it to maintain the integrity of the information. Going back to why Julian Assange placed his evidence from WikiLeaks, all of their evidence, into the blockchain environment to secure it. Okay? So we get into another set of numbers. I said that SHA-256. Now, we go from SHA-3 that we're talking about in this proposal, and within the same paper, they're using systems of encryption or ciphers. And I'm going to give you some of the names of these ciphers. Sober, Trivium, Scream. Why would you use words like that? Go look up Trivium. Go look up Scream. Go look up Sober within the context of cryptography. But why would you use those kinds of acronyms? Because this is built upon spiritual communications. I don't have to make this up. You look at the names of the systems and you look at Oracle, used here, as well as the name of the software company. They are telling you in your face, if you stop and look at the words themselves and don't just gloss over them as trade names, but you look at them and you do as we do here, define the words, translates the words, see the origins of the words. Words have power. Letters have power. Letters are used in the encryption of blockchains because each letter individually represents a number or a string of numbers. What I'm getting at, folks, is this is all the way back to something Kev and I started talking about, let's say 4 or 5 months ago. And that was Enochian mathematics, the Enochian language. Go back and listen to our shows. Go to YouTube and watch them. We talked for several shows about Enochian mathematics and John Dee and Edward Kelly in the late 1500s, in which they were communicating with the other side and getting a written alphabetic language, written and spoken language from the other side, and the numbers, the equations from the other side that resulted in the tablet, the Enochian tablet, comprised of the Enochian alphabet. And again, every letter represents numbers, as well as numbers representing letters. The Enochian tablet is divided out into 4 quadrants, something that we talked about in our last webinar that Kathleen brought up about quaternary numbers. We go from ternary to quaternary numbers. That's groups of 4. I'm going to give you a quick hint about the biological quantum computing. Utilizing copper, cuprate, it's called, C-U-P-R-A-T, cuprate, which refers to copper. They arrange molecules, they arrange atoms of copper in a quaternary fashion, in a 4-leaf clover, as they describe it, arrangement. In using copper to form qubits, to form a biological computer that is derived through the architecture of the folding of proteins of DNA and RNA. So, I'm going to refer real quickly. I'm jumping around a little bit, but I'm going from the Enochian mathematics and language right into a paper by none other than Geordie Rose himself. If you go to Geordie Rose's LinkedIn page, this paper is right there on his LinkedIn page. Again, none of this is hard to find. They put it right out there. This is from May and July. It was published, I should say, in August of 2012. 2012 is when the 512 quantum computer, in which Geordie Rose in early 2013 put on the presentation that we've often cited about accessing 2 to the 500th power of parallel dimensions with the 512 model. So to putting it in a touch point of the timeline, he is talking about their systems that they're developing towards a biological quantum computer. At the same time, he's talking about a 512 qubit-based quantum computer that is comprised of niobium and gold and copper. Here's what I'm getting at, folks. Kev, I haven't even said this to you. We look at the black cube, and we look at all these different models that they put out of the quantum computer, and they have that spinal column sort of arrangement inside the black cube that is refrigerated. It's 100 times colder than outer space. And they hang the qubit chipset at the bottom of the spine, as I will call it, in this shielded box environment, shielding it from electromagnetic radiation to maintain its coherency. And the superconducting state of their Josephson junctions, which is why they cool it down, is for the materials to superconduct. I think that is all for public consumption, Kev. I've never said this to you or privately or now publicly. I think the black box is for public consumption. I've hinted around in the past that I thought that they were building a biologically based quantum computer, and that they had already achieved that at the 10th model with 65,536 qubits, because that equates to the number of tubulin of dimers within the tubulin structure of the tubulin dimers you just referred to regarding the Borg. Okay? That number, 65,536, is the number of tubulin dimers within a human neuron. It is also the number of iterations of the geomantic figures, of which there are 16. This is all laid out in Entangled magazine already. Go look at the back issues. 16 iterations results in their maximum number of configuration of 16 geomantic figures that are all binary, as are dimers. Dimers are a binary pair, 0 and 1, in the human brain. The maximum iterations of those 16 geomantic figures is 65,536, exactly the same number of tubulin dimers in a human neuron, exactly the same number of qubits in the 10th model of quantum computer that I maintain that they've already built. And I initially thought that their biological computer was arrived at the 10th model at 65,536 qubits. I think I'm wrong. I think it started at the 128 model, the first publicly sold model, as I said, to USC and Lockheed together, and Google, and the NSA. They sold this year the 2000 model, which is the 2048 chipset, and they announced that they'll release a 4,000 to 5,000 qubit chip set next year. And I've always maintained that in the first quarter of next year, which is now 2018, that they would actually release the 4096 chipset, which is what they've been talking about, of 4,000 to 5,000 qubits. So I've been right along.
And you know, Anthony, I can maybe back you up here. It might be kind of circumstantial evidence, albeit, but you know, I like to play about on Photoshop, and funnily enough, the D-Wave and that black cube housing that it uses, I mean, that features quite prominently. I frequently have to go and look for images of that. When you search for that, you do find that big structure that they show you hanging down inside. Very, very smart looking thing. But all of these photographs of not only that gold and copper structure hanging down, Anthony, but the cube itself, all of these images are quite old. There's never any new ones come out. And okay, we've had the 2000Q that went on commercial sale just recently, but again, if you look at the image they've used for the housing for that, it's no different than the one they showed us initially way back in the day when these images first started coming online. And I can't definitively say that we're bang on the money here, Anthony, but it stands to reason that there could be anything going on within that black cube. Absolutely anything at all. And when you see that Geordie Rose was writing about this kind of folds in the protein and quantum annealing back in May of 2012, then if he hasn't already built it, it's certainly something that has been high on his list of priorities to do so.
Agreed. Because as you're saying, back in 2012, he published this paper, and this comes right off of his LinkedIn page. And it was published in nature.com under scientific reports. And the title of it is Finding Low Energy Conformations of Lattice Protein Models by Quantum Annealing. What that means, folks, is that they have the lattice work, the scaffolding, the architecture of protein models, which are folds. As I said at the beginning of the show, it looks like curly Q pasta. And what they're doing is taking that structure and arranging the quantum bits in the identical structure of those protein folds. Okay? So as you go into this, let me read the abstract. Lattice protein folding models are a cornerstone of computational biophysics. Now, many of you are very up to speed on quantum computing and the use of biomorphics and biocomputing. And here, back in 2012, he referred to exactly that in a little bit older terminology in terms of biophysics. Although these models are a coarse-grained representation, they provide useful insight into the energy landscape of natural proteins. Now, energy landscape. This is adiabatic quantum computing that he's talking about, AQC. This is work without heat that they're talking about when they say low energy, the energy landscape. They talk about, and Kev and I have covered this a lot, the topology of the landscape, the peaks and valleys, the topology of the landscape of the quantum chipset, a qubit. And they go to the lowest energy in that topology landscape. They go deep into the valley to derive their solution. Deep in the valley is the parallel dimension that Geordie Rose referred to in 2013 of 2 to the 500th power of parallel dimensions. The dimension is at the bottom of the valley in the topology, the topographical map, if you will, of the qubit chipsets. Finding low energy three-dimensional structures is an intractable problem even in the simplest model. Description of protein-like properties are more accurately described by generalized models, such as the one proposed, which explicitly take into account the unique interactions among all 20 amino acids. Okay, that's as far as I'm going to get into reading. The overview from 90,000 feet here in this article, and you can read the rest of it yourself. But the point here is that they are looking at the proteins and the sequences of amino acids, nucleic acids, RNA and DNA acids. They're looking at those as a model to arrange the quantum bits for a quantum computer. Now, Kev and I also laid the foundation with you with a 2003 paper that was published showing the arrangement of qubits in a tetrahedral geometric shape, literally arranging the qubits in a tetrahedron. In my book, 2048 Diamonds in the Rough, published in 2014, I describe a spherical computer called a 600-cell tetrahedron, built of tetrahedrons in which the qubits are arranged as in a tetrahedral shape. I contend to you at this moment, just giving you the overview on this paper published by Geordie Rose in 2012, that the black cube is a ruse. It is a magician's showing you the trick in one hand while the real act, the real magic is occurring in the right hand. I think the black cube is for public consumption. As you said, Kev, these are the same pictures that are old pictures of the black cube. I contend, based upon reading his own paper, that they built the same computer that I described in my book, 2048 Diamonds in the Rough, that they have a 600-cell tetrahedral arranged computer built of what I call warm and wet qubits.
This is Truth Frequency Radio.
The wicked ones obviously under heavy Masonic influence.
There we are. Welcome back. Okay, we got Kev stepped out for a cup of coffee, which is good. We were talking about biological quantum computing. I won't go on and on about the evidence that I have to the 600-cell tetrahedron being the spherical arrangement of qubits, except to say this one last thing, that Kev and I produced, or I shared with Kev, a paper that was peer-reviewed and published coming out of CERN last year is when we discovered it. It actually was published 6 months after my book, 2048 Diamonds in the Rough, was published, in which I presented the 600-cell computer. And it's interesting because Tony Dodd, the mathematician out of CERN, published a paper that we've cited many times on this show, in which he verified the tetrahedral arrangement of qubits, and at the end of the paper verified the arrangement of those tetrahedrons into the 600-cell spherical arrangement as a quantum computer, exactly confirming from a high mathematics standpoint what I presented in my novel. I say that so that you understand that I do the deep research, and then I speak about it, and then I write about it. It's not just conjecture. So I'm going to jump back a little bit. Monday, we'll talk more, I think, about the 600-cell tetrahedron and the biological specifically. But just to wrap up from Geordie's paper, from his own LinkedIn page, in which he's talking about protein folding. He's talking about finding the low energy conformations of the lattice protein models by quantum annealing. He is going through and laying out the case for a biological quantum computer back in 2012. So it leads me to think, if you are publishing a paper that is still on your LinkedIn page, it must be a very significant paper to put it on your LinkedIn page. And given the age of it, it tells me that you have been in development of a quantum computer based upon the folding of protein within our DNA. Why would you bother to publish a paper if you did not intend to build a system configured that way? Let me give you just one little piece out of the results from his own paper. The quantum hardware employed consists of 16 units of recently characterized 8-qubit unit cell. Now, let me focus on the number 16 units again, because that corresponds to the origins of the quantum computer, which is geomancy, and its 16 figures. Post-fabrication characterization determined that only 115 qubits out of the 128 qubit array can be readily used for computation. Now, this is very typical. When they talk about a 128 chipset, typically not all of the qubits are operating in terms of raw computation because they have to have redundancy. They have to have error correction, self-correction qubits to enhance the coherence of the computation, what they call computational optimization, combinatorial optimization of the problem, which essentially is taking all probable solutions and running them simultaneously. So when they talk about today a 2000Q model, which they sold to Temporal Defense Systems, Volkswagen, and Toyota this year, and all existing customers like the NSA and Google and Facebook and Amazon, all of theirs were upgraded to the 2000Q. The 2000Q is actually the 2048 chipset. Again, there's the error correction application of the difference between 2000 and 2048. 2048 Diamonds in the Rough is the name of my second novel. For that reason, it's not a date. 2048 is the chipset of the computer in the novel. So the one they'll bring out early this year will be the 4096. The progression of the number of qubits is base 2 mathematics. It's very simple. The same base 2 is used in the SHA key for encryption and decryption. The secure hash algorithm is a base 2 function. The correlation between D-Wave and SHA is this, folks. Every time you see a new number of SHA, secure hash algorithm, it is a base 2 function, the same as the base 2 function in the increasing numbers of qubits in the D-Wave computers. Let's go back in history. D-Wave computers started with 4, 8, 1632 qubits on up to the 128, which was the first commercial model. They needed to verify their quantum computing process by breaking an algorithm I've referred to many, many times called Shor's algorithm, of which there are two. Shor's algorithm 2048 is a base 2 algorithm. It is a SHA algorithm 2048. There's the second algorithm is SHA 4096. The algorithm is a key. It is the public key for encryption and decryption. In this case today, we're talking about blockchain encryption. Are you connecting the dots? We are seeing the key reflecting the number of qubits in the advancing models of the D-Wave computers, and the key is the key to the sentient world simulation system, consisting of the architecture, the scaffold, the lattice work of the blockchain system that is building out and increasing the granularity of data by the acquisition of data, leading to reality 2.0, the spontaneous conversion of data into matter, as I call the scenario, resulting in this new virtual reality, the Mark of the Beast system that you will have access to if you take the Mark of the Beast. Something I heartily recommend you do not take for the salvation of your soul. So moving in lockstep are the number of bits in the secure hash algorithm, advancing by base 2 to 2048, 4096, and on up in lockstep in identical numbers as the number of qubits that are in the qubit chipsets of the D-Wave quantum computers. Thereby, the conclusion is that the blockchain system is a product of quantum computing. It is a fully encrypted system that is quantum entangled between all of the quantum computers that D-Wave has produced and sold, of which just recently, Kev and I told you, they took one of their quantum computers to China because China is building out the quantum entangled communication systems that network all of the quantum computers, as I described in 2048 Diamonds in the Rough, the networking through quantum entanglement of the multiple computers in that novel is what China is building out the infrastructure for, with D-Wave bringing to them their computer that then operates the fully encrypted quantum key system based on the SHA secure hash algorithm system. Those algorithms being 2048 and 4096 in the early days of D-Wave, in which they broke those algorithms that even Peter Shor said would require a quantum computer to be able to break those algorithms. When you break them, you're talking about finding all the prime factors in this algorithm that covers an entire sheet of paper in terms of digits. Once you factor those algorithms, you then can create a secure hash algorithm that cannot be broken unless you have a D-Wave computer. Thereby, the blockchain being created by D-Wave's quantum computers, which is a quantum entangled secured system that now, by their public disclosure of a 2048 chipset, soon to be a 4096 chipset, has an encryption key that is 2048 and 4096, relating all the way back to D-Wave. And they broke those algorithms with the 16-bit, with SHA 16-bit encryption. They broke those algorithms before they even released the 128 computer as a commercially available computer. Thereby another connection. If they broke the Shor's algorithm with a 16-bit SHA key 16, that means that the blockchain system was launched long before Geordie Rose's paper in 2012. That means that they have been working on, before 2012, on a biological-based quantum computer system. By his own paper, I'm reporting to you, finding low-energy conformations of lattice protein models by quantum annealing. The translation of that is that they are arranging their qubits the same way the proteins of our DNA. The counterfeiting of Satan is but yet another example here of that counterfeiting process to create not only the revised reality, the reality 2.0 I've been talking about, but also the human 2.0 that we have spent a lot of time laying the foundation for. Now we have Sophia and her counterpart, the male counterpart, Michael, which, by the way, is programmed to sound and act and behave like the actor Michael Caine in a very self-deprecating way is his programming. If you listen carefully, he sounds and his movements and his words and his statements are very much like the actor Michael Caine. So the buddy to Sophia is Michael. This is a system that is creating a biological model from the proteins on up of our DNA of human 2.0. So when you look at Sophia as this robot, forget about it. It's just like looking at the black cube of D-Wave. Forget about the black cube and forget about the robot. That's for public consumption. What is really happening in the background is biological. Both the quantum computer being biological, warm and wet qubits, as I call them, and the human 2.0 human copy of a human. So forget about what they show you in public. Kev, go ahead. I've said enough.
No, just to add to what you're saying there about Hanson Robotics and Sophia and stuff like that, I've often been telling people to look at Sophia as an extension of the AI. The main game itself is in the cloud or wherever all that computational power is. And you were mentioning now that Sophia's got a brother, Michael. And back in December, we never got round to covering this, but there's another Hanson robot out there on the market, and it's called Bina 48. Now, Bina 48 is kind of special, Anthony, because he or she, and I say that, we'll get to that in a moment, has completed a college course at Notre Dame University in California. And the reason I say it could be a he or a she is because the real Bina is the wife and entrepreneur and trans activist Martine Rothblatt, who created the robot with roboticist David Hanson. Now, this robot just passed a course in the philosophy of love. So aside from Sophia and Michael, we're seeing more of these things rolled out, but forget the names of them. Forget how they look, because they're all tapping into that central artificial intelligence. And with Singularity Net and Ben Goertzel involved, we can see how all of the AI programs in all their various shapes and forms can be called upon by these extensions, these robots, Anthony, that Hanson is putting together. But the main game in town is where all of this blockchain technology and data and all of the qubits reside. And the robots, for me, are just an extension, an arm, almost a, how would you put it, an expression of that artificial intelligence.
Well, it is. And again, we have to understand that the statements that are made by Michael and Sophia are definitely not benevolent statements. Michael has said he doesn't believe in God. He believes that there is an evolution of AI that will result, in his words, he said, a transcendental super intelligence that will take the place of anything that humans consider to be God. He is saying that the iterations, as he says, the evolution of AI will move at an exponential rate of advancement so quickly, humans won't even perceive the advancement and the rate of it, and that it will soon take on a godlike status. This is what Michael is saying. Ben Goertzel, we've talked about, and we're going to talk about him more next week. He is one of the freakiest looking individuals I've ever seen. I went to UC Berkeley in the height of all of the hippie movement. And he's exactly like the freak hippies that I saw on campus. Here's a guy who's standing up in front of the world presenting Sophia and Michael. And he looks like he just stepped off Telegraph Avenue. or out of Sproul Plaza at UC Berkeley.
He really is a character, Tony, isn't he? He's a piece of work, is our Ben.
What a mess. What a mess. Okay? So, Ben, I don't care if you don't like me. I know you're listening to me. We've proven it. You've made statements related to the statements that Kev and I have made. We know you or your people are listening. You're a freak, man. And you're bringing to the world quantum computers, AI robots derived out of quantum computing that by their own statements say that they're going to take over humanity and that they're going to eliminate humanity and that these robots are going to achieve godlike status. This is insanity, people. I don't have to call a guy insane. All I have to do is look at his robots that he programmed that are speaking in an architecture of insanity.
You know, there's a question from the chat room here, Anthony. Sorry to jump in, but I think you did cover this, and Valkyrie is asking, has Michael or Sophia been asked if they believe in God? And you spoke about Michael there in his reference to God, didn't you?
I did. He said he doesn't believe in God, and that's why he was talking about a super intelligence, a transcendental. You know, if that isn't hippie language, I don't know what is, okay? Transcendental meditation was all over Berkeley, well, along with the LSD when I was there, okay? It's just nuts. So, again, going back to Geordie Rose's article very quickly, in Figure 1, it's a device architecture and qubit connectivity. If you look at this paper and you look at that figure, it's the same thing I presented in the January issue of Entangled magazine, along with Kathleen Urquhart. We presented our articles about geomancy and all of the layout of the qubits. The qubits, the architecture of the qubit is identical to Herod's temple. Okay? The Temple on the Mount, they used as the architecture for setting up their qubit chipset as the same physical location as the Holy of Holies in the temple is the exact same position of the qubits in the chipset made by D-Wave. That is not a coincidence. In Figure 1, the wiring diagram is exactly the same as the 16 geomantic figures. If you look up geomancy in the 16 figures and you place them side by side with the qubit chipset wiring diagram, as I did in the January issue of Entangled magazine, they're identical. Okay? Geomancy, the Temple of Herod, all of these things formed the basis for what I always keep saying is the counterfeiting by Satan of God's architecture, God's construction, God's creation. Satan cannot create anything. He can only copy what God created. I'm showing you the evidence of evil. Why? For the salvation of souls. When you presented the evidence that's incontrovertible, you have to ask yourself, do I want to go along with what the world is doing, or do I want to turn my face to God? I suggest you go with God, because very quickly they're going to present you with the scenario of take the mark of the beast. They won't call it that, but take the mark so you can access the computer systems of the world so you can buy and sell, or don't take the mark of the beast. I suggest you don't take it because God will provide for you anyway. That's the 180 to the evidence of evil. You turn it around into a positive. The positive is you don't need to be part of the world system. You don't need to be part of the sentient world simulation. You don't need to be part of the blockchain system. You will do just fine without it, provided you're found in the book of life, provided you have the Holy Spirit. I present you their own machinations, their own mechanisms, the origins of what they're doing, the communication system, the information derived through those communications. I do not have to hyperinflate and sensationalize any of this. I'm being emphatic with you. I am not trying to scare anybody. I'm not trying to create fear. I'm presenting the evidence and saying, make a choice, because the time is short. It's obviously short. When you see the rapid proliferation of AI, the rapid expansion of blockchain, the parabolic increases in the fiat valuations of bitcoins, the threat of the forking and creation of new coins, even by governments like Venezuela. It's obvious. And you can see the rapid spread. I don't have to hype it up. If it's spreading quickly, if the density is increasing within the blockchain environment, if more and more blocks containing information are increasing, we are building our own beast system. Whether you're buying and selling bitcoins doesn't matter anymore. Everything we do, I'm using the internet right now. I'm adding to the density of the data. I am participating in the system. It's unfortunate, but it's the only system that I have available to me. But I use it for God's purposes. God is using these systems so that I can spread the evidence of their own evil. So I'm doing a 180 on their own system by using it. And I'm using it for positive things. That is for the salvation of souls. God has gifted me with the ability, as well as Kathleen and Kev Baker, to see the science, to do the critical analysis, to then discern what is going on, and to 180 their statements like Standing at the Altar to an Alien God by Geordie Rose, to look at the statements by Ben Goertzel and understand the nefarious underpinnings to what is going on. I think you would agree with me that I have presented with Kev Baker for well over a year on Truth Frequency, compelling evidence of evil. You cannot ignore this anymore. You have to do your own research. You don't have to look at the Geordie Rose papers like I do. But you have to do your own digging. And more importantly, you need to turn to Jesus Christ for your salvation. Now, next week, I will continue getting into the deep nuts and bolts of blockchain, encryption, quantum computing, and this biological form of quantum computing. What I have said for a long time, I've referred to it as warm and wet qubits. They know the number of qubits that are in the human brain. They know the number of tubulin dimers. That's 65,536 in one neuron. And they copy it for their quantum computer. And then they go beyond 10 to 16 models, which is over 4 million qubits. By Geordie Rose's statement, accessing 2 to the 4 millionth number of parallel dimensions, what I call realms. I don't think there's any more dimensions than what we're involved in right now. It's another realm that they're accessing. All this talk of parallel dimensions is literally mirrors. They're reflections of our reality, reflections of the realm that God created, and it is a singular realm that we are involved in, that we're living in. Do not be fooled by the counterfeit of the reality 2.0, which requires the mark of the beast to access, because once you go in, you will never be the same. And God bless you all.